8 people have been confirmed dead and more than a dozen are injured after a truck driver veered into a crowded bike path in Lower Manhattan, mowing down cyclists and runners. New York police sources have reportedly told US media that a note was found in the truck, written by the suspect saying he did it in the name of Islamic State. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio gave a statement describing the incident by the Hudson River as a cowardly act of terrorism.
This was an act of terror, and a particularly cowardly act of terror. At this moment, based on the information we have, we know of 8 innocent people who have lost their lives and over a dozen more injured. We ask all New Yorkers to live by the idea: if you see something, say something, tell an officer immediately. If you see anything unusual, anything that worries you, be vigilant. And know that there will be extensive additional employments of NYPD officers this evening and throughout the days ahead.
Well, we're here actually only 300 feet away from where it happened. Now, the witnesses that we spoke to described walking out of class at Borough of Manhattan Community College and seeing mashed up bicycles on the ground along with body bags. People wondered if this was some kind of Halloween prank, when in reality it was quite a sinister situation, an act of terrorism in which 8 people were left dead and over 12 wounded. Now, from what we understand, the perpetrator, he was shot after he got out of this rented U-Haul that he was plowing into pedestrians with, and he shouted Allah Akbar, according to 4 eyewitnesses. And based on that phrase, we now understand that this is being treated as an act of terrorism. Not only are all around us are we seeing the New York City Police Department, their Strategic Response Unit, we're also seeing the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is on the scene investigating this as an act of terrorism. Now, the suspect who was shot in his abdomen after uttering that phrase that's causing the terrorism investigation, from what we understand, he is now in the hospital recovering from his shot. He is alive. The individual is 29 years old, and he has an ID from Florida. Questions are still being raised. What motivated him? Is this one of these lone wolves, or is this part of a network? What's going on? But the one thing that's certainly on people's minds is that the Halloween parade, the annual gathering here in New York City in which young people, teenagers, children march through the streets of New York City in costumes, that Halloween parade is happening, from what we understand, and those children are marching through the streets. However, there's a huge force of police on hand to make sure that nothing possibly can go on, and that no more violence and terrorism takes place later in the night. The entire city is on edge. We're here actually near the site of the World Trade Center. This incident took place not far from where the Twin Towers once stood, and terrorism is certainly on the minds of New Yorkers as the night continues. Now we're seeing a huge police presence on hand, lots of police, lots of military, FBI, NYPD, a lot of different forces. We're also seeing a lot of different media out here. We're seeing a lot of different people walking around in their Halloween costumes. It's a lively night, and there's a city on edge here in Lower Manhattan in New York City.
New York police have not officially named the suspect, who is in police custody in hospital. They described him as a 29-year-old Florida resident. According to police sources, he was heard shouting Allahu Akbar after getting out of the truck. People who witnessed the truck ramming in Manhattan described scenes of shock and panic. We asked political analysts for their views on the US counter-terrorism strategy.
I think we should really think about, the things that we're going to do to prevent this from happening in the first place. One thing that we do know is we've spent a good $1 trillion on the U.S. military this year, and since 9/11, about $6 trillion has been spent on the so-called war on terror. That's about $23,000 per U.S. taxpayer. And do we really feel safer from that money? I would say no. We're not investing actually in the things that we know would probably help prevent activities like that. That is poverty alleviation, education, the feeling of freedom and justice, issues around religious tolerance, those type of things which we can look at to prevent things like this happening in the first place. We're going to spend $1.2 trillion here in the U.S. over the next 30 years upgrading our nuclear weapons systems, but that is not going to stop a truck from driving down the street and killing innocent civilians.
We are in a vicious circle. The more the West reacts in a military or a very heavy-handed way, the more this confirms these messages of these twisted ideology that, oh, this is the infidel West, this is a crusade, they are killing Muslims, it's all war against Islam. Kind of global jihad attractive point. So this is really very sad that if the American action is going to be, we're going to fight them and kill them over there, overseas, because so that they wouldn't come to us, that's not going to be the solution, because you have a huge Muslim population in the West as well, in Europe and in America. So we have to address the ideology.
We have a country now that's become so incredibly polarized, so different, that you're going to see a lot of Americans, unfortunately, take this horrific incident, this incident where innocent lives were lost, to parade themselves in their political ambitions, talk about other countries or other causes, or bash President Trump or praise President Trump and all these things, when we should be coming together as Americans and making sure that this kind of atrocity doesn't happen to anyone else.
President Trump has given a statement on the deadly incident in New York. He described the killer as a very sick and deranged person, adding that law enforcement is following the situation closely. The truck ramming in New York follows a pattern of similar attacks in Europe over the past 18 months. Another man who witnessed the truck ramming in Lower Manhattan described what happened.
I definitely saw the car damaged. I heard a loud bang. The front of the car was totaled at that point, and the guy coming out of the truck was injured. That said, when I heard that there was a gun involved, oh, he's got a gun, and everyone was running, I peeled it to Rockaway Park, and I called the police.
A car and a school bus collided, and people in the school bus got hurt, and so a guy got out of his car and challenged the guy, and there's a big guy chasing the guy who hit the bus, and the guy who hit the bus came out. He was carrying a gun right on the West Side Highway, and this in between part here. He was running around. He was between the islands, but under the bridge. Yeah, he was running around with a gun, and so police from Stye came out, and then people called the cops, and so they were coming in, and the guy fired a couple shots before, and then there's a shootout between the police and the guy.
3 bikes all crushed up. One truck, it looked like it was just all messed up there, everything, cops flying. I heard 3 gunshots, just a lot of commotion going on.
When the noise first went off, the kids were running in this direction, but they were laughing because they thought it was a joke. And at first I'm like, this can't be real. And then I start walking over there, and then I see people running in that direction, holding walkie-talkies, and then I see police going over and EMS coming. So I'm just like, somebody must have got shot. And then when I get up there, I see the SUV total. I see the 2 bodies covered.
I just saw him walking down the streets there with his gun in his hands. Yeah, that's all I saw.
Did you see any kind of expression on his face?
No, he was all walking like he did nothing. Like he was just walking, not even running. He was walking, yeah.
And how was he holding the gun?
On his left hand, yeah.
And was he holding it up? Like
No, down, yeah.
Because I to catch my train to go back home. So I'm like, wait, either I have to go get something from class. So I run up and I see no one's in class. My friend's not there. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna like see what's happening. So I run up to the top floor just to see what the heck is happening on West Side Highway. I look down and you see like these forensic analyst people, all in white, comment and like started covering up the body.
In that time, I saw everybody was running from the side to her, and everybody was scared. And the story was, they said that somebody was driving and hearing the people in the streets. And also there is a shooting, but what happened exactly, I don't know.
But you said you heard the shot?
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah, I heard like 3 times.